Hey everyone, I'm Duncan Davidson, and I'm based in Berlin with the Microsoft for Startups team. And I'm here with Amali Diab and Annie Parker, and we're here to have a discussion about creating resilience for your development process and solutions. So, hello everyone.
Good morning.
Good evening.
And good morning, good evening, wherever in the world you happen to be. In fact, it's such a great morning here that I just dumped coffee all over my keyboard. So I'm hoping that everything stays together well enough that we can complete this.
Sure
This session is a bit of a take on what we're doing. We have a series that we're doing this month called Create, and we're doing it every Tuesday, where we have conversations with people in the startup development world, where we talk about how do we have resilience, especially in these challenging times. And for Build, we're doing this special session with a couple of our internal folks to kind of riff on these ideas a little bit more. And so one of the ideas that's been coming out in the conversation so far has been how do different people experience this resilience, and how do they actually accomplish the act of being resilient? And so I'd like to start out with a couple of questions to my fellow panelists. How do you calm yourself down, and how do you keep sane in these times?
Do you want to go first, Amali, or shall I jump in?
Sure, happy to jump in. So yeah, it's a really tricky one, isn't it? I mean, I think the thing about resilience is, keeping going despite the adversity, and I think feeling like you can continue to move forward, that you can still accomplish things, I think is really important. So, one of the things, I've been doing myself, but also, helping our startups to do is think about, what little goals can you set, what little achievements can you celebrate, just to make you feel that it's not just Groundhog Day over and over again, and that you can still, build things, build out your company and have achievements even despite the challenging times.
I think those little goals are really important. It's important to celebrate every success along the way, because the big deal of securing a customer deal or building out your next tech solution or securing funding, those things really do take a long time. It can be a real labor of love. So you need those little things to keep you going along the way. But the other thing I would add is understanding what your trigger points are. So as leaders, whether you're in engineering, in the sales department, in part of a founding team, we all know when we start to perhaps kind of lose our patience or start to feel more anxious. And whether it's you feel your pulse racing, you get short of breath, you can't sleep properly, you figure out what your triggers are and be really aware of them, because no one rarely will ever tell you to stop working. You have to figure that out for yourself, and you can manage that so much better as well. So if you feel perhaps you're kind of feeling really cranky and you can't figure out why, maybe go and get a piece of chocolate or have a glass of water, because it's probable that you're just running low on blood sugar. Obviously fruit's great too. Have a balanced diet, people. But just really understand what your triggers are and be aware of them and manage them as best you can.
Yeah, that's actually really, really good advice. It's actually something I've been working a lot on myself, is how do I recognize when I'm entering a phase or a state that I'm definitely not okay, right? Or at least I'm not acting okay. When my amygdala in my brain is actually hijacking everything else and kicking in the fight or flight response. So given that our horizons are so short, Amali, what are you doing to help kind of stretch out your planning? How are you actually thinking about just more than tomorrow? Because right now it's so easy for us to be stuck in this perpetual today. How do you actually get yourself to look tomorrow and into next week? And can you even get to next month right now?
Yeah, I think it depends on your situation. And, my personal view has been that if I am healthy, if my family is healthy, and if I have work, that is the biggest thing that kind of keeps me going. And beyond that, to just, I think, be kind to myself. As far as that planning, you're right. I think especially at the beginning of, when we were starting lockdown in London, so at the start of March, there was so much going on, and everyone was really trying to figure out, how do I deal with these circumstances? What is the, the immediate response? What's on fire? I think some of that has calmed down, and I think you've got this combination of both people having a little bit more space in some cases, or in some cases, sadly, being resigned as far as, these are issues which we have to deal with, and let's, how do we move forward with that? I think the biggest thing as far as that forward planning is just to make sure that you give yourself time to do that, especially at this time when there is quite literally no line between home life and work life. Actually taking your brain away, having that space to think creatively, to look forward, and I think to self-reflect on what has been achieved, as well as use that to think about what you want to achieve, is really important, because again, it helps you to feel like you've achieved something, as well as sort of thinking about, okay, what will the world be like in 6 months' time? How might I respond to that? And how does our business need to react to those changing circumstances as well?
And how about you, Annie?
Probably two things I'd say there. The first is be aware that everybody is in the same boat. Pretty much most engineering companies or early stage startups, or even growth stage startups, look at what's happened to Airbnb. Pretty much overnight, their business is gone. Recognize that you are not alone, number one. Second thing is always ask for help. Don't suffer in silence. Don't try and figure all of this out by yourself, because this is literally, a one-off kind of once in a few generations situation. So you aren't expected and shouldn't be expected to have all of the answers by yourselves. So this is where I kind of call on the making sure you've got a really good personal network behind you, or perhaps even if you're a more of an established startup or company, then making sure that you've got established mentors within the company, or an advisory board if you're an early stage founder, so that you can have that sounding board of people that you can go and ask for help and know that those people will be there to help you. And the second thing I would say, and this is from an old boss of mine who used to say, he was being tongue in cheek, of course, but don't waste a good crisis. In moments like this, where everything is uncertain and has changed and the rules no longer apply, then that means there's opportunity as well. So consider where those opportunities for growth are, or for doing things differently. Now that all of your perhaps engineering team is working from home, what could you do differently with that? Does that mean that it gives you an opportunity to streamline processes, look at how you could perhaps put things into the cloud that perhaps you were keeping on premise before? You have so many options in front of you. Don't waste a good crisis.
Amen.
And I think just to add to that as well, it's really interesting you mentioned that point around sort of, not wasting a good crisis. And I do think that, obviously none of us would have wanted to be in the situation that we are now, but it has, I think, in a lot of cases forced businesses to rethink how they manage their businesses. So I was chatting with a friend of mine who's at a startup recently, and she had previous conversations with their chief exec about working from home. He had felt reluctant to do so. He wasn't sure how they would manage it. They've obviously been forced to do this. And now he's come back and said, actually, we're going to switch our business completely. We're going to be a working from home primarily business, and with little co-working clusters where we need in person. So there might be some really helpful learnings, I think, from this experience as well. And I think to that point, Duncan, you mentioned about moving forwards, what might be the things that you might want to take forward, if there are any, and really thinking about how that might be able to benefit your business as well.
Indeed. One of the quotes that comes to mind, Tim O'Reilly repeated it. I think it's is it a William Gibson quote? The future is already here. It's just unevenly distributed. I keep thinking about this quote a lot right now, because it's like the world has actually shifted in where all the opportunity lays a little bit. Things that were going to take 2 years are now happening in the span of months, and there were some opportunities that were there that are no longer here, but there's others that are now opening up. As you work with the startups that are in the program and just out in the world, how do you think we can best coach the startups to be just really mindful of the fact that the opportunity landscape has shifted, and how can they take advantage of that? So how about Amala, you go?
Yeah, it's a really tough one. And I think it depends on the startup. No business is the same as another. And I think, to your point, Duncan, there are definite opportunities out there. There are obviously certain sectors which have been much harder hit than others. And I think for those companies where we're speaking to them and coaching them and supporting them through that, there's some, real home truths to think about. Look, what is the kernel of our technology? What is the kernel of our business concept? Can that be applied to different situations? So, smart pivoting, I think in some instances can be really helpful. I think for the others who are being successful, I think, again, just really keeping in mind how things might have changed. What are the, going to the point earlier, what are the advantages that can be taken from that? How has this changed, the way that people will be buying products? And actually, to that point, thinking about the buyer mindset is really important. We have all been changed by the past, 3 to 6 months, and thinking about, your customers, what might they be thinking about for their businesses? What are they going through? I think, that customer sort of mentality and putting your customer's hat on becomes even more critical through that.
Yeah, we had actually a really good example. Oh, go ahead, Annie.
So I was just going to say, I've seen quite a lot of the sort of practice of that with them. So I'm based over here in Australia, and we have two things that have been happening regularly. The first is, as community leaders, not just folks from Microsoft, but from across the whole spectrum of the VC, angel investor, other tech companies, other Australian corporates who just want to see startups continue to thrive, is just to create that safe space to bring everybody together and talk, to share ideas they might have, or to just vent, frankly, and just go, man, this is hard. And giving them that facility to do it. And the other thing that we've seen off the back of that is just, as we've sort of modeled that sort of behavior as community leaders, we've seen others then do it for other startups or for other founders in that place. So we've been folks putting up job boards and showing where there were opportunities for people that may have been laid off, looking at opportunities for startups to club together to get better deals for supply chain. There's been some really creative ways that I've seen the founder and the startup community look to help each other, whether they were individuals or actually companies together as well.
Those are all great ideas. It reminds me of a conversation I had recently with Brian Fitzpatrick. He's a CTO of a company in Chicago called Talk. And they do online bookings for high-end restaurants, and of course their business model vanished with all of the lockdown. But they thought deeply about it, and they identified, okay, we have two sets of customers. We have the people who are seating at the restaurants, but we also have the people who are the restaurants themselves. And how can we do well by the restaurants themselves? And so they pivoted, and over the course of a weekend, they now do online ordering for very nice restaurants. So and they're doing extremely well at it by just keeping in mind those opportunities.
And I think that point around, if you do pivot, really thinking carefully about what does that mean? Because I think, especially with current circumstances, in some cases the temptation might be, my goodness, we need to change everything, or we need to completely sort of rethink our product. In some cases that might be true, but I think that in most cases it's really around thinking more around how does your proposition stick, who are your key clients, and where can you sort of reapply the same concepts and package that differently. The messaging becomes really important. So for example, we've got one of our companies in our AI for Good cohort at the moment called Hello Lamppost, and they do this amazing technology around creating smart spaces, and they used to work applying their technology into parks or into public spaces, and obviously these types of things aren't being used as much currently at the moment, and they've now been sort of thinking about, okay, rather than using in public spaces in that way, how would that look if we were using our products in, let's say, hospitals or in shopping centres or in supermarkets where people are still having to go and need advice. So they provide basically sort of smart advice with local councils and allowing customers to sort of interact with that. So really thinking about how that needs to look, but also just being conscious of, if you are adding that new customer base to your product, you really almost need to sort of go back to the beginning of really thinking about what is the customer need, how do I fit my proposition to that, and also, is my customer in a frame of mind to buy right now, and are they buying from people who are new, and if they are, how do I make them feel trusted with that relationship, because obviously everyone is buying under pressure at the moment if they are having to buy. So trying to make sure that you're really anticipating what those customer needs might be and making sure that you can kind of target that effectively, I think is important.
Very much so. So speaking of pivots, I want to take just a little bit of a pivot because there's a couple of really important topics that I really want to get into. In our organization at Microsoft for Startups, we really believe that diversity and inclusion is a core superpower that startups should have, and helping make sure that we're more diverse than ever is definitely on all of our mission statements. But one of the things that I'm starting to become aware of is how this crisis actually could make the work of D&I and startups harder. And by that, I mean, a white guy like me, I'm worried about, what happens to my business model? What happens with my strategies? What happens with the opportunity if I get laid off, or if I get if the company goes out of business? What am I going to do to pivot into the future? But I'm starting to become aware that there's an entire category of concerns that people that aren't necessarily in my position have. And I'm wondering if you all have some insight into how the crisis could be affecting this. And let's start with Annie on this one.
So your hypothesis is sadly true. If we look at some of the PitchBook data, and this is based on VC funding that's gone into startups in the US market from the first quarter of this year, typically we see a figure, really sadly, of only 2% of funding going into female founders. And that statistic, or that percentage, gets much, much less for other underrepresented groups, whether it be people of color, people with a disability, veterans, you name it, that 2% gets starkly worse. Now, just looking at the female founder percentage from the PitchBook data that came out for the first quarter of this year, it's actually going down, and it was going down in Q1. So if we then think about what that's going to look like in Q2 on the back of COVID-19, I'm going to guess it's not going to be very pretty. Now, the irony or the dichotomy of that is if you look at all of the statistics, whether it's sort of performance data of companies, whether it's from McKinsey, BCG, pick any of the sort of the big strategic analyst companies, all of their reports say the same thing, that if you have a more diverse team, you will be more profitable, you will be more innovative. So the part about this that's so frustrating is the logic and the data tells us to invest in diverse teams. Yet the practice of doing so hasn't changed. Now, some of that really is back down to the individual risk profile. And when a VC looks at what they're going to invest in, they look for something that looks similar to something that they've seen before. So if you look at a person, you're ideally looking for a founder that's done 5 or 6 laps around the block, has a couple of exits, maybe a couple of average, maybe a couple of failures. Now, if you're a female founder or another founder from a diverse group, the chances are you're a first-time founder. So in this scenario of COVID-19, you are going to get overlooked. And it's heartbreaking. But, and here's the other part of this, which I find fascinating. As a result of being starved for funding, underrepresented founders tend to be really, really good at managing their businesses better. They have to make sure they've got revenue coming through the front door. They have to make sure that it's repeatable revenue because they know they can't rely on VC funding. So the corollary, the irony of all of that is oftentimes the forcing function of that lack of funding actually helps underrepresented founders force themselves to build better businesses. Now, I guess what I've just done is sort of almost argued my own point against myself. I think the happy medium is to probably do a bit of both. We should be, lobbying and making sure that we're getting all of these amazing founders who are building great companies to get better access to capital to help them grow their business. But I do think there's going to be a bit more of a resurgence around this kind of being more focused on making sure you've got repeatable revenue first. And that's no bad thing for founders either, because they retain more equity stakes in their own companies and control as a result.
Yeah, and I think adding to that point, seeing what opportunities there might be at the moment is really important as well. So we've been running sessions around managing your talent, for example, in current circumstances. We've got a session coming up next week about it. And there are some really fantastic opportunities to hire people. At this moment in time, if you are a company who has, just raised funding, or you've got your revenue, which is steadily coming through, there are some amazing people who are coming onto the markets who maybe you might have struggled to hire before. And I think really thinking about what your what you want your company to stand for is important here, because it's true. We can always look for reasons why we shouldn't be hiring diversely. We can look for reasons why we shouldn't be creating sustainable businesses, which are ecologically sound as well. There is always a reason why, right? And I think it's really around thinking, look, does this matter to you? Is this something which, considering that you are continuing to build your business, considering that, there will be growth out of current circumstances, are those the foundations you want to lay for your company for the future? And if not, and if it matters to you, then put your actions, your money, your mouth, where your heart is, and say that this is something which you can build into your business. I'm a former entrepreneur myself. I know business building is tough, but also I think the thing about building diverse businesses is you can actually do quite a lot for zero money as well. What it does take is a little bit of effort. And I think, if anything, if current circumstances have given you any sort of time, as far as, an opportunity to have a think about how you want your business to grow, take that time. There are lots of really amazing organizations out there who can actually provide guidance, frameworks for hiring well. Tech Talent Charter, which is one that we have in the UK, which supports businesses around hiring diversity and increasing diversity in their tech talent. All of these types of resources are available out there. But it does take, a bit of work as far as, you making a decision to say this matters to our business and we want to change this going forwards.
Yeah, there's a matter of intentionality that really matters here, and it's a reminder for all of us, no matter what we look like, no matter what position we're in, to approach this entire thing with the intentionality to do what we should be doing by our principles and make sure that we're leveling out our biases.
Yeah. Absolutely. And going back to that point earlier, take it as an opportunity to move your business forward. If this is something which you haven't thought about before, in the same way that you might not have considered maybe, remote working, I think, to see how resilient businesses can be and how they can thrive, even when pushed through stressful circumstances, I think, take that lesson and see this as an opportunity to start building in those good habits.
So what massive experiments or what great things could we actually encourage our startups to do right now in this time period? And to set the frame a little bit, we're coming up on, a lot of companies are doing performance reviews, and yet how do you do a performance review in this situation, right? All you can measure from anybody over the last few months is how well you adapted to the crisis in the first months of a pandemic, right? That's a pretty tough thing to evaluate. But instead of approaching it like that, how else could we approach some of these thoughts in terms of what can we do to help people grow through this, and what can we do to help level and reset everything here as we move forward?
I think as leaders, it starts off with modeling the behavior that we want to see in our own teams, our own staff, the companies we work for, which is, when faced with the situation yourself, what did you do? Do you feel comfortable and confident that the behaviors that you elicited and showed to your team were what you wanted them to see? Because if it wasn't, then you kind of need to maybe have a conversation with your own team and say, hey, I dealt with that really badly. Here's what I should have done better. And I think owning up when you fall short as a leader is really important. But that said, if you do have people in your team that seem to have just really sort of absorbed the opportunity of a change and thought differently and shown different creative ways about how to solve problems, celebrate the way that they did that, not necessarily the specific person, because it's not about just shouting somebody's name out and making them feel good. It's more, keep rewarding the behavior that you want to see in the rest of your team. So I think that would be the first thing I would do. But then the second thing I would do in any leadership role in any team is to make sure I really consider the scenario of that human being at that particular time. So I'd want to know, are they home alone? Are they struggling because they're an extrovert and they're really, really suffering because they're not in an office and they don't have the time to be around humans and get the energy they need to be creative? Has their entire job just changed? So whether it was the model of changed overnight with the restaurant business that you mentioned earlier, Duncan. Is it fair to performance review somebody who's literally, perhaps the majority of their job has just completely disappeared? Of course it's not. But you can start to look for, absolutely, we always want to reward against impact and deliverables, but we also want to reward against, empathy and how that human being responded to that change and how they helped others around them as well.
And I think that's one of the key things, really, isn't it? Which is how, in some cases, rethinking how do you measure success, right? Because if it is that your traditional success measures for the last few months have slightly gone out the window, you might have set, targets around revenue generation and your business is dried up because of current circumstances or whatever that looks like. How do you continue to look at what makes a great person within my company, what makes a good contribution outside of just what might have been, let's say, the financial targets or how many projects they've delivered and those sides of things. I think the other thing which is worth kind of keeping in mind is also thinking about people's growth from a learning perspective as well, and making sure that you offer people continued opportunities to learn as well. Because I think from a development standpoint, again, that is something which helps people to feel that they've moved forward, that they've achieved something. And it can be something as simple as what one of the things we do with Microsoft actually is we have a learning day. So there's one day a month which is assigned against time which you can take. You can have that conversation with your managers around, this is my space and my opportunity to complete my learning or to continue with some learning as well. And so taking that opportunity with your own teams to make sure that you have those conversations. How are you going to be growing going forwards? What are the skills that you might need? From an engineering standpoint, it might be a new technical skill. It might be a personal development side of things. It might be coaching, mentoring, going to your point, Annie, earlier, for people who are having tougher times. It might be, helping others to support them or helping them to sort of reach out and feel that they have, again, ownership of their lives in some way as well. So take that time to build in a good learning and development program and continue that even despite the challenging circumstances. And I think that's worth considering, certainly from the UK, because even if you furlough staff, you can actually continue to have training for those staff. So that opportunity is available certainly from here as well.
Excellent. Thank you for that. So we're coming up on the end of our time together here, but there's one more question I'd like to ask both of you. Since the Build audience really is not just startups, it's obviously everybody, every developer that is in the Microsoft ecosystem and even beyond now. If you know somebody, if you were to speak to somebody in that ecosystem who works at a big company or a medium company or even a small company and are thinking about making that jump to making a startup, what's the one piece of advice you'd give to them right now in this situation?
Well, look, I would just go straight in and say, do it. If you've got a great idea that that you believe is a problem that needs to be solved, clearly do that part of it first. Don't just write something down on the back of a paper napkin and go, I'm done, I've got my business plan. You do need to put some thought into making sure you're solving a real problem, that that there is customer need out there and that it would be something that people would be happy to pay for. Once you get to that point, the best time to jump and start a business like that is yesterday, and the next best time is today. So just do it. Once you've taken that first leap of faith, you'll realize that actually it's not as scary as it seems, and the next right step will become obvious, and you just keep taking that next step, one step at a time, and you build it up, and lo and behold, hopefully 10 years later, you've got the world's largest billion-dollar startup.
Yeah, I think totally echo what Annie said. That obviously, you need to make sure that you are in yourself in a situation where you can, feed your families and all of these types of things. But putting that to one side, that there is so much that can be done, as a side gig, even if you don't want to sort of step out of your full-time role because of stability things. All of us are working from home. We've kind of forced ourselves to realize how much we can actually focus and work at home as well. Take the opportunity now, because I think the other thing, which is in a strange way, because of everyone being there, in some cases it's easier to get people's time. So people who you might have struggled to get conversations with before or get advice from, actually now's a good time to be able to do that. So take this opportunity, book some time in, and hopefully, you'll have an amazing company having that think through within current circumstances, which is even more resilient than maybe it would have been at other times.
That's beautiful advice, Amali. Thank you so much, Amali and Annie. It's been a pleasure talking with you this morning, afternoon, evening. And now let's send it back to Mission Control back in Redmond.